Hello, and welcome to When Spreadsheets Hit the Fan. I'm your host, John Litterick. In today's episode, I talked to Edmund Hugo Lunde. Edmund Hugo Lunde is the co-founder and chief operating officer of Arion, a privately held engineering company in Houston, Texas. Mr. Lunde formed Arion in 2018 following a long and successful tenure with Wood Group, a FTSE 100 energy services company headquartered in Aberdeen, Scotland. Mr. Lunde has served on the boards of several private equity portfolio companies in the US, Norway, and Sweden, and he was previously the chairman of the board for a major engineering company in Norway and a board member for a large engineering company in Saudi Arabia. Mr. Lunde is a dynamic C-level executive who has consistently delivered breakthrough results in revenue, profitability, competitive positioning, employee engagement, and customer satisfaction. Recognized as a transformational change agent adept at turning around underperforming business and delivering significant earnings growth, he has led multiple 100 million plus domestic as well as international mergers and acquisitions. His strategic mindset, his focus on people, his passions, performance, and profits have allowed him to lead, advise, and guide multiple management teams and their companies to market leading positions in their industry segments. Mr. Lunde has been a chief executive for businesses ranging from 100 million in annual revenue with 500 staff all the way up to 1.2 billion annual revenue with more than 7,000 staff across 10 countries. Before founding Arion, Mr. Lunde held a variety of senior management positions with international companies such as Wood Group, Alliance Engineering, FMC Corporation, Kongsberg Offshore, and several others. He was a co-founder of Instrument Technology Group in Oslo, Norway in 1991, and he started his career as an instrument engineer and officer in the Royal Norwegian Air Force in 1979. On today's episode, we discuss things like value propositions and why organizations neglect keeping them current, examples of companies who failed to keep their value propositions current, and finally, and this is really interesting, how Steve Jobs is an example of a leader that understands the importance of maintaining the value proposition even in the midst of adversity. If you like what Edmund is saying, please follow the show and leave a rating wherever you're listening. Let's jump right into it.
Welcome to When Spreadsheets Hit the Fan, a Birdview podcast. This is a show for leaders in fast-growing professional service organizations looking for the latest conversations around service delivery best practices. Let's get into the show.
So, Edmund, I mean, you've had 40 years of doing this and you've done some impressive things. So, look, we want to hear from someone like you that's got that much experience. You've been around the block a lot. Let's talk about what's the biggest mistake you're seeing companies, organizations making. What should they stop right away?
Yes, I have actually been around the proverbial block, if you like, a few times. And I have had the good fortune of starting and running a few businesses through my career. And I've seen some mistakes that has happened and can certainly talk to that. But first of all, let me just say thank you for allowing me to participate in this podcast here today to share my thoughts and views. To me, lacking or losing track of the value proposition is really the biggest mistake that a company can make. As you know, the value proposition is really the one thing that you're doing to make customers come to you to use your product or to buy your service. So to me, the biggest mistake you can make is to lose focus on your value proposition. You also asked what companies should do to prevent the issues and the mistakes. And the one thing I would want to say is that they cannot be complacent. I think it's really important that you really focus on your own success and celebrate in the glory of what you've achieved to date. But always keep in mind that markets are evolving, things are changing, and you need to update and progress in your value proposition and in the services and capabilities that you offer to stay ahead of the competition. If not, and I'm using a reference from the music industry, your business could be a one-hit wonder.
Oh, you know what? That really resonates with me because in my other role as being, business development person for 25 years, I often find I have been out of sync with the value proposition, right? Our company's product or service has evolved and I'm still, talking about it like I did 5 years ago because, the company and we haven't thought about how to, talk about the new services, the new value proposition. So I've seen firsthand that you're spot on. It certainly affects sales and marketing for sure. So Edmund, can you give me an example of where you've seen this mistake, cause a real problem? And, also, like, I think our listening audience wants to understand, like, what would the negative impact be in terms of tangible things like revenue and resources if someone's not updating their value proposition, as you described. There's also like the intangible things like brand and reputation. So, can you give our listening audience some examples of like what the negative impact could be, both on a tangible and intangible way, if they're not updating their value proposition?
Sure. There are many examples of companies that have made the mistake and have experienced what I call a Kodak moment. In other words, a situation where a company fails to recognize the change in the market and fails to position what the business to address the structural change that's happening in the market conditions. And Kodak is a very, very good example. They're one of several mega companies that we have seen fail. Companies like Kodak, Polaroid, BlackBerry. You remember the old iPhones that we used? Prior to the iPhone, BlackBerry was the one thing. No longer really in the market. Blockbuster, the US video chain, no longer in the market. Pan Am, big airline, and even Toys R Us, and ultimately the old General Motors, massive failure. And they're all companies that stuck to their initial value proposition. They didn't address the market changes, didn't innovate, didn't recognize how the market was moving. And as a result, some of these companies are no longer with us. I also see many smaller companies, especially entrepreneurial companies that are looking to grow and expand their business, have some issues and make some mistakes. They often struggle to redefine their new value proposition as they start to grow and expand their business. And in doing so, often end up with competitors coming up and positioning their businesses to take away the market share that you have worked hard to generate initially in your business. So the focus on really the innovation, the products and the services is critical, and the failure to do that has a very negative impact on your business. I really believe this is one of the main reasons that we see many initially successful companies, especially entrepreneurial companies, bring fantastic products to the market. They stay in the market for 2 or 3 years, and then suddenly they disappear because they haven't been able to evolve and continue to grow and expand their business and adapt or adjust the offering or the product that they're offering to meet the customer requirements. I really like to refer to the old Marshall Goldsmith saying, what got you here will not get you there. And in other words, that focuses on the fact that you need to innovate to stay ahead of the competition. If not, somebody else will step up and take your market share and take your market position. And they will do that very, very quickly. The market is shrinking. Time to market is becoming more and more important. So staying focused on the value proposition and what you can offer there is very, very important.
Yeah, that was excellent. And you gave like some really excellent examples. BlackBerry, by the way, is really relevant to us here up in Easy Projects because it's just down the road about an hour's drive. We're in Toronto and it's in Kitchener, so we know that story well. And we've seen what happened with that. So we got great stories, great examples. You alluded to a lot of this already, but I'm just going to get you to maybe just go over it one more time. So if we want to not make this mistake of not updating our value proposition, what should we really focus on? What should we do?
I think you really need to focus on what sets you apart. It's easy to lose your view on what made you successful in the first place. And I think it's very, very important to believe in the product you have, believe in what it takes to take this product to market, and then be continuously focused on how you can evolve, how you can change things, how you can move things forward. Negative impact on the business can be, a lack of revenue coming in because others are starting to learn and do what you're doing, and they're offering products that are as good or better than what you have. And in major corporations, you can see companies that go through restructuring, reorganization of their business, losing focus on the value proposition, and in doing so, they get actually value destruction. They lose focus on what made them successful in the first place. They also often, consolidate some of their businesses to take cost out of the operation, and in doing so, end up losing some of the goodwill that was generated in that business to make it successful, and that can be destructive to your business. It can be confusing to your customer and even your staff, and you can even see staff starting to look for opportunities elsewhere because they don't um, really buy into what the company is offering and the direction that the company is taking. So having a good, solid value proposition is key to the long-term success of a business.
Okay, excellent. I don't think anybody can agree with that and disagree with that, and you've really, really laid it out very well. So one of the things that we're trying to do on every episode of When Spreadsheets Hit the Fan is challenge our guest to take their wisdom and distill it down into a simple maximum of what they would stop doing and what would they start doing. So no pressure, but do you think you could, in one sentence, create a maxim out of your wisdom?
Yeah, I think so. Stop being complacent is number one, and number two is really focus on your differentiators. Focus on what sets you apart. I think that's what can ensure success for you in your business.
All right. Stop being complacent and focus on your differentiators. I like it. Very good. So, you've told us in your experience this mistake that you're seeing, like, organizations are, they're being complacent. They're not updating their value proposition. They're not focusing on their differentiators and updating their value proposition. All great wisdom. But, here at When Spreadsheets Hit the Fan, we also want to kind of like pull back the covers and try to think about, why is this happening? We know that you don't know for sure, but, we'd like to hear your theory, your opinion on it. So why do you think, you've talked about it a little bit, but let's kind of like narrow it down and talk about it now again. Why do you think organizations are, not updating their value proposition in a timely way? What do you think is the culprit, the cause of that?
I think for smaller entrepreneurial companies, they get so focused on the day-to-day operation that they take their eye off the prize. They really don't understand and focus on what really got them there, because they get busy with setting in up IT systems and back office accounting and finance system, HR systems, and all that an entrepreneur doesn't necessarily have the depth and knowledge to do. So he needs to spend time to learn that and get the help to do that. And that takes their eye off the prize. And for entrepreneurial companies, I think that's one of the major challenges that they have. In larger organizations, especially publicly traded companies, they often become very short-term focused. They have to respond to what happens in the stock market. And often when you do that, especially in a down market, you have to step in and start looking at, okay, how can I save cost? How can I reduce cost in my operation? And the areas that very often gets cut off at the early stages is what you do on the innovation side, what you do to really further advance your differentiators and what sets you apart, which is that innovation portion of your value proposition. And that can have a very detrimental effect on the business and long term. Put you in a position similar to what happened to Kodak and others, where you fail to recognize the structural changes in the market and were then unable to position the business to continue to be a major provider in the longer term.
Yeah, it is. It's really amazing how much not keeping your eye on this. It's really, when you lay it out like that, it really has a dramatic impact, right? I mean, you're bringing this to the forefront just about how dramatic this can be, whether you're a small or large company. And I really do think your reasons, that you gave, why it's happening, that makes sense. It resonates with me. It's what I've seen, in my 25 years in IT sales as well. So, but besides your experience, my experience, do you have any, other third-party sources that would kind of validate this, that, maybe you could refer our listening audience to, that they might find value in it?
Sure. If you're if you're really looking for empirical evidence to support the fact that your value proposition is key to the long-term success of your business, I would just point to some of these companies that we have looked at. You may want to go out and look at companies like Blockbuster and Polaroid and Kodak and Toys R Us and the old General Motors to see what was it they did that made them fail. What was it they didn't recognize? They didn't recognize the change. They didn't recognize the need to keep your value proposition, your differentiators, the service offering that you have and are offering to your customers up to date. So they basically took their eye off the prize and neglected to innovate and didn't do the strategic planning that's necessary to continue to evolve. And as a result, some of these companies ended up going into bankruptcies, and some of them are no longer in the market today.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think this is one where just go and look at the examples of companies that failed to do it and see what happened. I can think of one organization that I read a 30-page case study on where they were doing it right, Netflix, and I read that before Netflix was a household word, and sure enough, the white paper 6 years ago was right. They were doing all the right things. They were updating their value proposition. They were doing all the things, and here we are 6 years later, and Netflix is a household name. They're no longer the disruptive technology. They are the sustaining technology. So I agree with you. Like case studies both on the negative, like looking at the Blockbusters, the Polaroids, and then also on the positive, like the Netflix and that.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about Netflix because Blockbuster was actually offered Netflix as an acquisition back in 2000.
There you go. I didn't know that.
And Blockbuster turned them down because they saw them as a startup that really didn't have a long-term future. They didn't see the value in the streaming of video services, and turned them down. And Blockbuster at the time had, I think, 8,000 or 9,000 stores and were the biggest video chain in the US. And Blockbuster did, I think, 30 million or something in sales. And today, Blockbuster do about 30 billion and have 200 million subscribers. So, great opportunity that was missed for Blockbuster for sure.
Exactly. And it's not like one of these stories where it's, over a 30-year period. This was like really fast. Like I can remember going to get movies for my daughter at Blockbuster, and then all of a sudden I turned around and we were watching Netflix and there was no Blockbusters. It was a fast process, right? So it's also very, very fast how this disruption happens if you're not keeping an eye on your value proposition.
Yeah, I think it's imperative that every business owner set aside the time necessary to really focus on the value proposition and see how this should evolve with the market demands, with the customer behavior and the competitor behavior. Because if you fail to do so, you will over time put your business at risk. And competitors are always looking to surpass you in their offerings. So it is key to really focus on what you can offer, what sets you apart in the market, and do what you can to improve that as you go forward to make sure you stay ahead of the competition.
That's excellent. I was going to ask you a little bit more on the theory, but I think you've covered it so well. I just have sort of one last question on sort of the kind of the theory. How quickly do you think our listeners could see these benefits if they follow what you advise?
I think they can see that relatively quickly, because if you get a good focus on what sets you apart, if you understand your differentiators, if you understand your market position, you put yourself in a position where you can offer something to the market that others may not have. And that allows you to be a market leader in your market, allows you to control the pricing in the market, allows you to expand and grow your business. And I think that can happen relatively quickly if you focus on those differentiators, those areas of green ocean, if you like, or blue ocean in the old INSEAD mantra. INSEAD is the world's largest business school, and they have what they call a blue ocean strategy, where you focus on what is it that sets you apart. And if you focus on that and tie that into your value proposition, you can very quickly get to a market where you are the number one or number two provider, and then be the one that offers the best services to your customers.
Oh, that's really interesting. I never knew any of that. That's a great tip. I like it. Okay. Here's, where the rubber hits the road, as they say. Okay. We have your experience about what companies need to do in terms of their value proposition. You've given some great benefits about, why it's important not to be complacent and keep looking at your differentiators. But I know our listening audience out there is like, okay, how can I actually, implement this? What are some easy steps to do? So, Edmund, what would step one be? How would you get this going? How would you change the complacency?
Step one for me is to really carefully assess the service offering, map out your differentiators, and put pen to paper to define what your value proposition really is. So it is, write it down. That's number one, write it down.
Yeah. It's as simple as that, right? Write it down. Okay. So step one's fairly easy. Easy in the sense of mechanically easy. I mean, it's going to take a lot of thought. You could be writing for a while because, thinking about your differentiators is, I've had to do it many times, and it's, it's challenging, but it's that easy of just doing as pen and paper. So great point. But let's talk about step two. After you have step one done, what's step two? What would be the next thing you would suggest?
Well, step two for me is always to bring in the team. This is not something you do in a vacuum. You have to work with your organization, and you need to get the team that's working with you to buy into the directions that you're setting in your value proposition, and that they understand what it is you're trying to convey and communicate through the value proposition. You also need to assess your competitor positioning to see how does my value proposition stack up against the competition, and then carefully listen to feedback that you get from the market, from your customers, so that you can adjust your offering as necessary to stay ahead in the competitive market. And please also make sure that your plan clearly defines who is responsible and what the timeline is for implementation.
Yes, the old RACI chart.
That's it.
Yep. Yes. The best laid plans will fail if there's not a RACI chart. So we, encourage our audience to heed your advice and go out there. If they've never heard of what a RACI chart is, RACI, they look it up because that is sound wisdom. Very good. Anything you want to add in terms of steps?
No, really. I think it's fairly simple. It's really just focus on two or three little things, and that is, what is the differentiator? What is it going to take to set us apart? And then write it down so that everybody buys into this in your organization, because you need everybody to be really focused around what it is I'm selling to my customer. Because all of us should be salesmen. Every time we meet a potential customer, we should know the elevator speech on what sets us apart and what allows us to offer our customer something that is unique that he will want to buy. And that is your value proposition.
Very good. Well said. Okay. Now, here's the thing. We all know that you can have a really great idea, you can have a really great plan, but things can go awry, right? I'm sure a lot of people didn't have in their strategic plan, that there would be a pandemic and they'd have to have most of their workforce working, from home remotely, right?
Yep.
You can have a great plan, but things can go wrong. So, what could go wrong that we could anticipate, in trying to update our value proposition frequently?
You could be so busy that you don't have time to put the effort towards it and do the work that's necessary to really clearly define what are your differentiators. What is it that sets you apart? It sounds easy, but it's hard work, and you have to get your team to embrace it and participate. They need to commit to it. They need to provide the dedication that's necessary, and the willingness to always improve. Because if you're happy with status quo, you're not going to move forward. You have to always look at how do I take the next step, and that needs to be something that you build into your process as you go through this. And where I've seen companies fail is when they don't take this serious enough, put enough effort to it, and really focusing on the fact that if you don't have a strong value proposition, you are likely to fail in the markets you operate.
Okay, very good. Sort of same question, but from a different angle. Let's say somebody out in our listening audience, wants to do this, believes, they can get those steps going. but they are having some kind of resistance with their peers or the culture. So they want to do it. They know how to do it, but there's a resistance for them to overcome. Do you have any advice for that individual?
I think you just have to be very dedicated and have a strong belief in what it is you're offering. I can give a few examples. Look at Apple and Steve Jobs as an example. He started Apple, built the company, had some unique products. They ran into some trouble because they really didn't see where they would take the business. Went up against some strong competition, and back in in 1985, 10 years after they started the company, Steve Jobs was really pushed out of the Apple position as the CEO, and had to leave the business and started Next Inc., which was another computer company. One of the reasons they failed initially was they didn't really have a clear vision on where they wanted to go, and struggled with adapting their value proposition, as I see it, to always offer competitive products into the market. So Steve took some Apple employees with him. They started the Next organization, and despite a lack of success in that organization, Steve was always really focused on innovation and development. He saw an opportunity with with Pixar, the video animation type company that John Lucas was developing. He bought into that, and over the next few years, he was able to really become a billionaire by investments into Pixar and that technology. So he leveraged the innovation capabilities that he had learned through Apple and through the early years in Next, as well as the skills that he has developed as a CEO in the Next organization to then do that investment in Pixar and develop Next also to a point where they became an attractive acquisition target in the market. And Next, the company that Steve Jobs was running, was then approached by Apple. Apple wanted to buy Next, so Steve left Apple, joined Next, and they were acquired by Apple. And in being acquired by Apple, he ended up back in the Apple organization, and eventually became CEO again at Apple. And I'll bring Apple up because Apple has been unique when it comes to looking at the value that they can offer to the market and the products they can offer to the market that gives them a competitive advantage. And that is through, looking at what is it the customer is looking for, what is it he needs, what can we offer that's unique. And good examples of that are, as an example, the iPod. That was the first time that we were able to put not just a cassette tape in our pocket with one band playing 24 songs, but we could have 1,000 different artists in our pocket playing 1,000 different songs, which really revolutionized the music industry. It took music from the LP and cassette deck type operation into then something that you could carry with you anywhere, you can listen to anywhere, and allowed Apple then to offer a service where they could offer these songs and this music to their customers. They progressed from that into developing then also the iPhone. Saw an opportunity in the market to come in with a product that had really a computer capability that you could have in your pocket, that offered cell phone service, and over time also camera capabilities that allows them to corner the market for personal cameras. People no longer need to go buy a separate camera. They're just using their phone to take the pictures they want to take. And again, they developed this based on what they thought was needed in the market, where they saw a market opportunity, and in some cases even created a new market where there wasn't any. And that was by being innovative, thinking outside the box, thinking ahead on what does the customer really want. So Steve Jobs is someone that I've looked up to for inspiration, and someone that I've seen apply innovation and an ever-evolving value proposition to build a business that creates new markets or creates a leading type position in the market where you control pricing, where you control the opportunity to stay ahead of the competition through continuous innovation. And we've tried to apply some of that in the company that I'm now running here at Arion, where we're laser focused really on the value proposition, focused on our differentiators, and on the innovation that's necessary for us to succeed. And very pleased to say that we have applied what I've learned through the years and are applying it on a day-to-day basis, and have been able to build a very strong company in record time. And it's exciting. I've worked in big companies and have struggled to turn around a super tanker, and now I'm working in a smaller company where we have the ability to quickly affect what's happening in the market. And it's interesting to see how by small tweaks to the value proposition we can step out and take on new markets and new opportunities and continue to grow our business.
Well, it's exciting, and it's I like that you practice what you preach. That's great. That's a great way to end the conversation. So, look, Edmund, I thoroughly enjoyed this. I mean, you gave great case studies. I mean, the Blockbuster Netflix thing obviously was, it really resonated with me because I read the positive case study. You brought in some insights about Blockbuster I didn't know. It was a very good conversation. I really appreciate it. I'm sure our listening audience got quite a few gems. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me on When Spreadsheets Hit the Fan, and love to have you back as a guest in a year and hear more about your insights on finding those differentiators, updating your value proposition. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
You've been listening to When Spreadsheets Hit the Fan, a Birdview podcast. Keep connected with us by subscribing to the show in your favorite podcast player. If you like what you've heard, please rate the show. That helps us to keep delivering the latest and best practices for professional service teams. Until next time.